Hi, I am Dr. Ayda Başgün-Martin, and in this video I will discuss with you how the substances can move into and out of the cell through plasma membrane. Just to remember the plasma or cell membrane structure, plasma membrane made up with the double layered, we call bilayer phospholipid molecules. Of course, we have some proteins that embedded into the cell membrane. They act like channels or carriers. And out of the space out of the cell, we call extracellular space. Inside of the cell, covered with the plasma membrane, we call intracellular space. In a cell, the substances can move in and out, and by two main mechanisms. One of them we call physical or passive process, another physiological active process. What is the main difference between those two processes? And either they require ATP or not. Active processes requires ATP, requires energy to do that, and passive processes do not require any ATP. Passive processes work according to concentration gradient. What that means? Differences between the concentration, and substances move from high concentration areas to the low concentration areas. However, the active process is different. It's movements from low concentration area towards the high concentration area. That's why you need energy to do that. What is the passive processes? We will discuss 4 different types of passive processes: diffusion, osmosis, facilitated diffusion, and filtration. We will discuss them one by one. We will define what are they, and we will give the example happening via these processes in the body. Active processes, there's active transport, endocytosis, exocytosis, and transcytosis. Again, you need to know the definitions and what type of molecule or cells use this type of processes. And you need to know the main differences between these two types of processes. Diffusion is a passive process. Diffusion can be for gas, liquid, or the solid substances. And definition of the diffusion is the movement of atoms, molecules, or ions from region of higher concentration to the region of lower concentration without energy requirement. This type of movement, diffusion, occurs due to constant motion of atoms, molecules, and ions. Only substances that the cell membrane is permeable to, so it can easily be diffusing, it's certain gases such as oxygen, carbon dioxide, and other lipid-soluble substances. In this picture, as you may see, there's a beaker full of water, and there's a drop of the color dye, and as you see in the beginning, there is nowhere has a color, but when the drop is dropped into the water, there is the high concentration area only in the drop side. By time, as you may see, the dye is dissolved in the water, and every part of the water is now has the equal amount of the dye. So we call this equilibrium reached. And in the below, again, you can see, for example, it can be a salt or sugar crystal. It's a solid particle, or urea, whatever it is. And there is a membrane, selectively permeable membrane, such as like our cell membrane, and allows only the solids pass here in this example, and the picture on the below. And you see one side has more red dots than the other side. By time, if the membrane is selective to passage for only the solid, the red dot solid, by time both sides will be equally dissolved with this type of solid molecule. We call this diffusion. Osmosis. In osmosis, the difference is we are talking about the movement of the water. So osmosis is the movement of water across a selectively permeable membrane from region of higher water concentration, notice water concentration, to the region of lower water concentration, because the substance that moving is the water for osmosis. Water moves into a region containing higher impermanent solid concentration. What that means? Water moves toward the higher solid concentration area. Passive process, osmosis, and do not require any ATP. As you may see in the beaker below, you see the water level at the beginning is the same level. The membrane with the red dot is allowing only the water to move. As you see, water move towards the wherever the has higher solid area. I talk about the tonicity and osmotic pressure in my previous video. Please make sure to check and learn about tonicity and osmosis in detail. Another passive process we call facilitated diffusion. As you see, there's a cell membrane has embedded protein channels or receptors, and diffusion across the cell membrane through ion channels or transporters we call facilitated diffusion. Again, passive, do not require any ATP. If ion, that means has electrical charge, they cannot able to pass through with diffusion only, so they need to use their own selective channels. Sodium, potassium, chlor, glucose, and amino acids, this type of molecules. And glucose needs an insulin receptor to get into the cell, and sodium, potassium, and chlor, they have their own type of receptor to pass through it. So again, it's a passive process, no ATP required. The last passive processes that I will discuss is filtration, process that forces molecules through the membranes by exerting pressure without energy requirement. We call filtration, used to separate solids from water or small particles from the large ones. When blood plasma leaves capillaries, water and small solids are filtered, but large plasma proteins are not. Large plasma proteins hold the water in the blood vessels. That's why we don't lose entire our blood, but we have blood, only the some small substances, small proteins went through filtration. Another area that filtration happens is our kidneys, and I have a histological slide picture here, and it shows the nephron, which is the smallest unit of the kidney, that filtrate the plasma, filtrate the blood plasma to the Bowman capsule. Is the first step to create urine. Active transport is a type of active processes that means requires energy. That means substances move from low concentration area towards the high concentration area, opposite like in the passive processes. So movement of substances across a membrane from region of lower concentration to region of higher concentration against the concentration gradient with the requirements of energy, ATP, which is ATP is the energy currency in our body. We call this is active transport. The active transport use carrier molecules in cell membrane. Active process requires ATP, which is the energy. Good example, again, sugars, amino acids, calcium ion, hydrogen ion, and sodium potassium pump use this type of processes. Cell membrane covers the cell and creates inside and outside space. And the fluid inside the cell we call intracellular, and outside of the cell we call extracellular fluid. And they both, extra or intracellular fluid, contains lots of electrolyte. They both has sodium, potassium, magnesium, calcium. But most common electrolyte for extracellular fluid is the sodium cation. And for intracellular fluid, it is the potassium. So potassium is mostly called intracellular electrolyte, and extracellular fluid has the sodium instead. What if already I have so much sodium outside, but I need more, so I need to take out from the cell the sodium? What should I do? Or and I already have so much potassium inside of the cell, but I need more potassium to get into the cell. How I should do these processes? In our body, we use the sodium potassium pump, and 3 sodium goes outside in this way, and to exchange to put the 3 sodium to outside, you need to have 2 potassium inside. So you're exchanging to 3 sodium goes extracellular fluid, and so inside of the cell losing 3 sodium, but gains 2 potassium ion instead. For that, you need to use the sodium potassium pump. It's an active process. It requires the ATP and it requires the protein channel and enzyme to do that. Endocytosis, another type of active process. Endocytosis is the movement of substances into the cell inside a vesicle. So endo sounds like enter, right? Because its substances enter inside the cell. And if the substance is too large to enter by any other methods, and we can use this method to take in the cell. So there's 3 different type of endocytosis. When we talk about the pinocytosis, membrane engulfs droplets of liquid. So the substance is liquid and taking inside the cell through endocytosis we will call pinocytosis. Phagocytosis is the membrane engulfs solid particles, such as a white blood cell in your body. If engulfs the bacteria or cell debris to clean out and engulf it, and we call this phagocytosis. That's why we call many of the white blood cell, many different type of white blood cell that you will learn in the future, phagocytotic cells. And the process is one, phagocytosis. Receptor mediated endocytosis, membrane engulfs specific substances, but it has to have a certain receptor protein on the membrane for that substances to able to do that. Exocytosis, it sounds like the opposite of endocytosis. It sounds like exit, right? It's the same, it really is. Release of substances or particles from cell to the outside of the cell via a vesicle we call exocytosis. You will see the vesicles contain the particles comes and becomes the part of the plasma membrane, and whatever inside of the vesicle spill into the outside of the cell, and vesicle membrane become the part of the plasma membrane we call the exocytosis. Good example for that is the release of neurotransmitters, chemical messengers that release from the end of neurons. And you will see this when we talk about the neuromuscular junction or the synapse. When we say synapse, that means 2 neurons communicate with each other through this way, or neuromuscular junction, that means neuron brings the order to muscle to contract or relax. So that's why we use the exocytosis. Last type of active process and I'll talk about is transcytosis. Involves receptor mediated endocytosis followed by exocytosis. So it has to be endo plus exocytosis. Quickly transport substances from one end of the cell to the other. Move substances across barriers formed by tightly connected cells. Good example is the transport of HIV across lining of anus or vagina. Okay, thank you for watching. And please feel free to give me feedback by clicking like or subscribe button below in this video, or leave a comment kindly. Thank you.